Hello all, this is a tutorial covering how to batch render in 3D Studio Max with a simple compositing tutorial in Adobe After Effects. Batch rendering is one of the keys to rendering complex scenes efficiently. For this lesson, we are going to use a simple scene to clearly illustrate the process, and you can download the files below. This scene was downloaded from sketchfab and textured using Arnold textures. Even though I'm using the Arnold render system, the tips and tricks here in this tutorial can be used for other render systems. Now the first step is to make sure you have a camera created. And here it is. The next step is to make sure all the textures you're going to use have been created. In this case, I also created a green screen texture and an ambient occlusion texture that will be used later. The next step is to make sure you have the render settings properly set up. In this case, I'm setting it at 1828 by 778 and apply the denoiser on the beauty pass. Now I'm going to divide the image in parts because further color correction is going to take place in the compositing phase. Because there is a transparent object, the best way to do this is to create a plane and apply the green texture to it. I place the plane in front of the curtain. Now if I render as is, there are a lot of green reflections and you will see the green screen through the glass objects. So I select the plane, then select Arnold Properties, select General Properties, click Visibility, select Camera Primary Rays, and deselect the rest. And in the shadows, I deselect everything. So when I render now, the green screen is still present, but the objects are not interacting with the screen. Now this cup and the grapes I want to separate in the composite further, so I duplicate the plane and move it just behind the cup. So now everything is ready for the batch render. The first element is the curtain by itself, so I isolate the curtain. Then I click on Tools, then Manage Scene States. Click Save and Shift select all the parts. Finally, give the state a name. Still Life Curtain. Click Save. And now the scene state has been saved. Now I right-click and I hide all. Hide the front green plane and save it in the scene states as Still Life Midground. Unhide all again, then save it in scene states as Still Life Foreground. Finally, the final scene state, I hide all the green planes, then Edit, Select All, then apply the ambient occlusion texture. Save it as Still Life Ambient Occlusion. So here you are with all the scene states saved. If you select any of the scene states and hit Restore, it will restore the scene to the scene that has been saved. Now go to Rendering, then Batch Render. Click Add. Since we have 4 scene states, then we click Add 4 times. Select View 1. Select Camera and place the camera in the scene. Then select Scene State, Still Life Ambient Occlusion. Then select the output path. Name it Still Life AO and set it as a PNG. Since I'm only exporting one frame, I do not set a time, but if this were an animation, it will be set to beginning and end times. Click on View 2, select the camera in the scene, select Scene State Still Life Curtain, set the output path. Name it Still Life Curtain and set it to PNG. Click Save. Select View 3. Set the camera to the scene camera. Select the Still Life Foreground Scene State. Set the output path. Set the name to Still Life Foreground and save as PNG. Finally, select View 4. Select the camera to the scene camera. Set the scene state to Still Life Midground. Set the output path. Save as Still Life Midground and save as PNG. Now we are ready to render. Click the Render button. For long renders, I usually turn off the monitors and leave it rendering overnight. Sometimes the renders are so complex that I'll render multiple parts across several nights to get the entire render done. Part 2, Compositing. Now that everything is rendered, let's open Adobe After Effects. Here in After Effects, I import the files. I place the Still Life Curtain in the background, followed by the Still Life Midground, followed by the Still Life Foreground, and finally the Still Life Ambient Occlusion. I hide the ambient occlusion and the foreground layers. On the Still Life Midground, I go to Effect, then Key and select Key Light. I click on the screen color and select the green. I select the Still Life Foreground and go to the Effect, then Key and select Key Light again. Finally, I select the Ambient Occlusion layer, set the mode to Multiply. Then I select Effect, Color Correction, then Levels and make it brighter. Finally, back to the Still Life Midground, I select the CC Light Sweep. Lower the sweep intensity and increase the width and intensity. Then I copy the settings and apply it to the Still Life Foreground and make some minor adjustments. Add a new white solid mask it to give the image a simple flare. I now add a black solid. Mask it with a rounded rectangle tool. Invert it and then feather it to give it a little vignette. Finally, add a mask to clean up some of the spill light. And I add a Gaussian blur to the background to separate it more from the foreground. So these are some of the techniques I use to make short films. This is how I render large complex scenes efficiently and composite them in Adobe After Effects. If you like the content, please subscribe. It really helps the channel grow, and there's more content coming your way.